The shadows seemed to swallow her whole as Lillian Zachary pressed herself against the weathered barn wall, her black mourning dress blending into the darkness. The sounds of fiddle music and laughter spilled from the barn's wide-open doors, a stark contrast to the emptiness that had consumed her life for the past 18 months. Widow at 26, it wasn't how she had imagined her life unfolding in the bustling frontier town of Redemption Creek, Colorado. It was 1876, and the mining town was celebrating its 10th anniversary with the grandest barn dance the territory had seen. Lillian hadn't planned to come. In fact, she had firmly declined multiple invitations from well-meaning neighbors who insisted it was time she rejoined the living. But curiosity, or perhaps loneliness, had drawn her here tonight, though she couldn't bring herself to step into the light. The music swelled as the caller announced another lively reel. Couples whirled across the makeshift dance floor, their boots stomping in time with the music. Women's colorful skirts flared like prairie wildflowers, a sight that made Lillian's plain black garments feel even more confining. "You planning to hide here all night, madam?" The deep voice startled her so thoroughly she nearly cried out. A tall figure materialized from the darkness beside her. In the spill of lantern light from the barn, she could make out a lean face with sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of a summer storm. His black hat was pushed back on his head, revealing a lock of dark hair that fell across his forehead. "I'm not hiding," Lillian said, straightening her spine. "I'm observing." A smile quirked at the corner of his mouth. "Mighty dark corner for observation. Perhaps I prefer the darkness." The words came out more sharply than she'd intended. Instead of being offended, the stranger chuckled. "Fair enough." He leaned against the barn wall beside her, tipping his hat back further. "Name's Vincent Garrett. Most folks call me Vince." "I didn't ask," Lillian replied, though there was less bite in her tone this time. "No, you didn't." He gazed out at the dancers. "Beautiful night." Despite herself, Lillian followed his gaze. The full moon hung low over the mountains, bathing the valley in silver light. Lanterns strung between fence posts created pools of golden warmth. It was beautiful, though she'd scarcely noticed beauty since Thomas died. "I suppose it is," she conceded. They stood in silence for several minutes, watching the revelry. The song ended, and after a brief pause, the fiddle player began a slower, more melancholy tune. The dance floor cleared somewhat, as only couples remained. Vincent Garrett pushed himself away from the wall and turned to her. He removed his hat and made a formal bow that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. "You'll dance with me?" It wasn't a question, and Lillian bristled at his presumption. "I will not." "Begging your pardon, but I think you will." His confidence was infuriating, yet there was something in his eyes, not mockery, but understanding. Sometimes the hardest step is the first one back into the light. Lillian's throat tightened. "How did you the black dress?" He gestured vaguely. "And the way you're standing here, wanting to join in, but holding yourself back. I recognize it." Something in his expression shifted. "Lost my wife 3 years ago. Fever took her." The simple confession disarmed her. "I'm sorry, as am I for your loss." "How did you know I'd lost someone?" "Folks talk. This is a small town, Mrs. Zachary." Lillian started. "You know who I am?" Hard not to know the woman who single-handedly kept the town's only general store running after her husband passed. That takes grit. She'd never thought of it that way. After Thomas died in the mine collapse, running the store had simply been necessary for survival. "So," Vincent extended his hand. "One dance. Then I'll escort you home if you wish, and you need never attend another social gathering in your life." A laugh escaped her, surprising them both. "That's quite an offer, Mr. Garrett." "Vince," he corrected, "and I'm known for my generosity." Perhaps it was his gentle persistence. Perhaps it was simply that she was tired of standing in shadows. Whatever the reason, Lillian found herself placing her gloved hand in his. "One dance," she agreed, "and then I'm going home." The moment they stepped into the light, Lillian felt dozens of eyes turn their way. The widow Zachary dancing? And with Vincent Garrett, of all people? She nearly faltered, but his hand at the small of her back steadied her. "Ignore them," he murmured. "They'll find something else to gawk at soon enough." As they joined the other couples, Lillian realized she knew virtually nothing about her dance partner beyond his name, and that he too had suffered loss. "What is it you do, Mr. Garrett?" she asked as they began to move with the music. "Vince," he reminded her. "I run the Silver Spur Ranch outside of town." Recognition dawned. The Silver Spur? But that's the largest cattle operation in the county. He shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. It's grown some in recent years. Some. Lillian shook her head in disbelief. My husband used to say the Silver Spur owner could buy half the territory if he wanted. Your husband exaggerated. But there was a twinkle in his eye that suggested Thomas hadn't been entirely wrong. As they danced, Lillian became aware of how long it had been since she'd been held, even in this most proper of ways. Vincent was an excellent dancer, guiding her with subtle pressure at her waist, his steps sure and confident. For a rancher, he moved with surprising grace. You dance well for a cowboy, she observed. And you dance well for a shopkeeper who's been hiding in shadows. The song ended, and true to his word, Vincent stepped back. Thank you for the dance, Mrs. Zachary. Lillian, she found herself saying. If I'm to call you Vince. Lillian. He smiled, and for the first time, she noticed the dimple in his right cheek. May I see you home? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I think I'd like that. The walk through town was short, just 3 blocks from the community barn to her modest home behind the general store. They walked in comfortable silence, nodding to the occasional passerby. When they reached her door, Lillian turned to thank him. I enjoyed the dance more than I expected to, she admitted. High praise indeed. Vincent smiled. Perhaps next time you'll venture more than one dance. I didn't say there would be a next time. No, you didn't. He tipped his hat. Good night, Lillian. She watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the moonlit street. Only when he turned the corner did she let herself into her empty house. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, a perfect late September day. Lillian opened the store at 8 o'clock sharp, as she did every weekday. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as the first customers arrived, Mrs. Peterson needing flour and sugar, old Mr. Jenkins for his weekly tobacco, and the Miller children sent for penny candy. Around 10, the bell rang again, and Vincent Garrett ducked through the doorway. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing that same wayward lock of dark hair. Good morning, Mrs. Zachary, he said formally, aware of the other customers lingering in the store. Mr. Garrett, what can I help you with today? He approached the counter, setting down a list. Ranch supplies. Quite a few items, I'm afraid. As Lillian looked over the extensive list, she raised an eyebrow. This will take some time to gather, and you'll need the wagon for delivery. I brought men and wagons, he said. I can wait. And wait he did, making small talk with other customers, examining merchandise on the shelves, and occasionally catching Lillian's eye as she moved about the store gathering his items. It took nearly an hour to assemble everything, and by then, they were alone in the shop. That's quite an order, Lillian said as she calculated the total. Largest we've had this month. The ranch needs restocking before winter sets in. He leaned against the counter. And I might have added a few items that weren't strictly necessary. Oh, she glanced up from her figures. Thought it might give me more time to ask you to have dinner with me tomorrow evening. Lillian's pencil stilled on the page. Mr. Garrett, Vince, he corrected gently. Vince, I don't think that would be wise. Because you're still mourning? Yes. And because people will talk. People always talk. It's what keeps small towns entertaining. When she didn't smile, he sighed. Lillian, I'm not asking for your hand in marriage. Just dinner. 2 people sharing a meal and conversation. She studied him for a moment. At close range in the daylight, she could see the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of long days in the sun, the small scar on his jaw, the flecks of gray at his temples that suggested he was perhaps in his mid-30s. Why me? She asked finally. The question seemed to surprise him. Why not you? There are a dozen unmarried women in town who would be delighted to dine with the owner of Silver Spur Ranch. Women who aren't. Damaged goods. Vincent's expression darkened. Who called you that? No one. Not to my face, at least. Lillian waved a hand dismissively. But I've heard the whispers. Poor widow Zachary. Such a shame. Still so young, but damaged by grief. Grief doesn't damage a person, Vincent said firmly. It transforms them. There's a difference. The conviction in his voice gave her pause. How poetic for a cattle rancher. I read, he said with a small smile. Extensively. Another reason the good people of Redemption Creek find me somewhat odd. You don't seem odd to me, Lillian said before she could stop herself. Then have dinner with me. Tomorrow. I'll come by at 6. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was simply the novelty of having someone look at her as a woman rather than an object of pity. Whatever the reason, Lillian found herself nodding. 6 o'clock, she agreed. But we'll dine here, not in public. As you wish. Vincent paid for his supplies and left with his ranch hands to load the wagons. Lillian watched from the store window, noting how the men deferred to him not with fear, but with evident respect. The next evening, promptly at 6, Vincent arrived at her door with a bottle of wine and a basket from which emanated delicious aromas. You didn't need to bring food, Lillian said as she let him in. I've prepared a stew. And I've brought bread from the hotel restaurant and pie from Mrs. Martinez. I thought we could combine our efforts. The meal proved to be surprisingly enjoyable. Vincent was an excellent conversationalist, well-read and thoughtful. He spoke of books they'd both enjoyed, shared stories of his travels before settling in Colorado, and listened attentively when she spoke of her own limited adventures. How did you come to own the Silver Spur? Lillian asked as they lingered over Mrs. Martinez's apple pie. Vincent swirled the wine in his glass. I won it in a poker game. You're joking. Not at all. I was passing through town 5 years ago, stopped for a night at the saloon, and ended up in a game with the previous owner. He was desperate to leave the territory and return east. I was looking for a place to settle. He shrugged. It was meant to be, I suppose. And you've made it prosper. With a lot of hard work and good men. He set down his glass. What about you? How did you end up running a general store in Redemption Creek? Thomas, my husband, inherited it from his uncle. We moved here from Denver 4 years ago. Lillian's fingers traced the pattern on the tablecloth. I knew nothing about running a store, but Thomas taught me the books, ordering, everything. When he died, she swallowed hard. It was either learn the rest or lose everything. And you chose to learn. I did. Vincent reached across the table and briefly covered her hand with his. That kind of courage is rare, Lillian. The touch was fleeting, but it sent warmth spreading through her. Flustered, Lillian rose to clear the dishes. Let me help, Vincent said, gathering plates. You don't need to, I insist. My mother would turn in her grave if I let a lady clean up alone after feeding me. They worked side by side at the wash basin, their hands occasionally brushing as they passed dishes back and forth. It was such a domestic scene, so ordinary and yet so intimate, that Lillian felt her chest tighten with a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. When the last dish was dried and put away, Vincent thanked her for the evening and departed with a promise to call again soon if she would permit it. Lillian agreed more readily than she had expected to. Over the next several weeks, Vincent became a regular visitor at the general store and Lillian's home. They established a routine of sorts: dinner twice a week, occasional walks through town on Sunday afternoons, and once, a drive in his buggy to a nearby lake for a picnic. October turned to November, and the first snows dusted the mountains surrounding Redemption Creek. The town began preparations for Thanksgiving, and the general store grew busier with holiday orders. One afternoon, as Lillian was closing the store, the town's gossip monger, Mrs. Wilkins, stopped by ostensibly to purchase baking supplies. You and Mr. Garrett have been spending a great deal of time together, she observed as Lillian measured out cinnamon. Mr. Garrett is a friend, Lillian replied evenly. Just a friend? Mrs. Wilkins raised a penciled eyebrow. My dear, a man like Vincent Garrett doesn't spend time with a woman unless he has intentions. I believe Mr. Garrett is capable of friendship without ulterior motives. Perhaps. Mrs. Wilkins leaned closer across the counter. But you should know there's talk. Lillian stiffened. There's always talk in Redemption Creek. This is different. Some folks are saying it's disrespectful to your husband's memory. That Thomas isn't even cold in his grave, and you're already. Thomas has been gone for 1.5 years, Lillian cut in, her voice sharper than she'd intended. And what I do with my time is no one's concern but my own. Mrs. Wilkins drew back, affronted. Well, I was only trying to be helpful. As a friend. Thank you for your concern, Lillian said, wrapping the woman's purchases with perhaps more force than necessary. That will be 85 cents. After Mrs. Wilkins left, Lillian closed the store and retreated to her living quarters, her mind churning. Was she dishonoring Thomas's memory? She'd worn black for a full year, had lived like a virtual hermit, had focused solely on keeping the business afloat. Wasn't that enough? When Vincent arrived that evening for their usual Tuesday dinner, Lillian was still distracted by Mrs. Wilkins's words. "Something's troubling you," he observed as they ate. Lillian hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Mrs. Wilkins paid me a visit today. She informed me that there's talk about us." "I see." Vincent set down his fork. "And this bothers you. Doesn't it bother you?" "Not particularly." He studied her face. "But it clearly bothers you." "It's not the talk itself," Lillian tried to explain. "It's the implication that I'm somehow betraying Thomas by living again." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "May I tell you something about grief, Lillian? Something I've learned." She nodded. "Grief is like a river. At first, it's a raging torrent that threatens to drown you. You think you'll never escape it. But eventually, if you don't fight it too hard, it carries you somewhere new. Somewhere you can step onto the bank and look back at what you've survived." Lillian's eyes stung with sudden tears. "And if I'm not ready to leave the river? Then you stay in it until you are." Vincent reached across the table and took her hand. "But from where I'm standing, it looks like you've already found the shore. You just haven't admitted it to yourself yet." His words resonated with something deep inside her. She had survived. She was still surviving, day by day. And somewhere along the way, the crushing weight of grief had lightened enough that she could breathe again, could find moments of joy, could contemplate a future that wasn't defined solely by loss. I think perhaps you're right," she admitted. Vincent squeezed her hand gently. "For what it's worth, I don't believe Thomas would want you to stop living. No one who truly loves another would wish that." The tears spilled over then, running silently down Lillian's cheeks. Vincent produced a handkerchief and handed it to her without comment, allowing her the dignity of her emotions. When she had composed herself, Lillian took a deep breath. "Thank you for understanding." "Always," he said simply. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibility. Then Vincent cleared his throat and released her hand. "I should go. It's getting late." At the door, he paused. "Lillian, I won't call again unless you want me to. If the talk in town troubles you, or if you need more time—" "No," she interrupted. "I want you to call. I enjoy your company." The smile that lit his face warmed her through. "Then I'll see you Thursday." As November deepened toward winter, Lillian found herself looking forward to Vincent's visits with increasing anticipation. Their conversations flowed easily, spanning topics from literature to ranching to the small dramas of town life. He made her laugh, something she had thought might never happen again after Thomas died. The night before Thanksgiving, Vincent invited her to dine at the Silver Spur the following day. "I know it's short notice," he said apologetically, "but the ranch hands always have a big dinner, and I thought you might enjoy the company." Lillian hesitated. Dining at Vincent's home with his employees would certainly fuel the town gossip. "You don't have to decide now," Vincent added, "but know that you're welcome." He paused. "I'd very much like you to come." There was something in his eyes of vulnerability she rarely saw that made her decision easier than she'd expected. "I'd be honored to join you," she said. The next day, Vincent sent his buggy to fetch her. The drive to the Silver Spur took nearly an hour, giving Lillian plenty of time to second-guess her decision. But when they crested the hill and the ranch spread out below, her doubts receded. The Silver Spur was impressive, a sprawling main house of hewn logs with a wide porch, several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lanterns glowed in the windows against the early twilight. Vincent met her at the door, looking different somehow in his own domain, more relaxed, perhaps, or simply more himself. "Welcome to Silver Spur," he said, helping her down from the buggy. "I hope the journey wasn't too cold." "The blankets kept me quite warm," Lillian assured him, accepting his arm as they walked to the house. Inside, the warmth and savory aromas enveloped her. The large main room was dominated by a massive stone fireplace and a long table set for at least 20 people. Several men in clean shirts were already gathered, along with a few women whom Lillian guessed were wives of the married hands. Vincent made introductions all around. The ranch foreman, Hank Miller, and his wife Emma were particularly welcoming. By the time they sat down to the feast, 2 enormous turkeys, every imaginable side dish, and pies of all descriptions, Lillian felt surprisingly at ease. During the meal, she observed Vincent with his employees. He knew each of them well, asking after a child's recovery from illness, congratulating a young hand on breaking a difficult horse, teasing the cook about a secret ingredient in the stuffing. They clearly respected him, but there was genuine affection there too. "Your ranch hands seem very loyal," Lillian commented later as they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. "They're good men. And women," Vincent added with a nod toward the kitchen where Emma and the cook were supervising cleanup. "I try to treat them fairly." "It's more than that." Lillian turned to face him. "You've created a family here." Something flickered in Vincent's eyes. "I suppose I have, in a way, though not the kind of family I once hoped for." The admission hung in the air between them, fraught with meaning. Lillian found herself thinking of the children she and Thomas had planned to have someday, dreams cut short by falling rock and timber in a mine shaft. "It's getting colder," Vincent said, breaking the moment. "We should go in." The evening concluded with music around the fireplace, one hand playing fiddle, another the harmonica, while a third produced a surprisingly good tenor for folk songs and ballads. When the buggy was brought around to take Lillian home, she was genuinely reluctant to leave. "Thank you," she told Vincent as he helped her with her coat. "This was wonderful." "You're welcome here anytime," he said, his voice low and sincere. "Anytime at all, Lillian." The drive back to town gave her time to reflect on the day, on the unexpected sense of belonging she'd felt at the Silver Spur, and on the man who had created such a warm and welcoming home in the midst of the harsh Colorado frontier. December arrived with a heavy snowfall that blanketed Redemption Creek in white. The general store was busier than ever with Christmas approaching, and Lillian found herself working long hours to keep up with orders and inventory. Vincent still came for dinner twice a week, often bringing small gifts, a book he thought she'd enjoy, candied almonds from Denver, once even a delicate silver hairpin he'd spotted in a catalog and ordered specially for her. A week before Christmas, he arrived at her door looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I have a proposition for you," he said after dinner, as they sat by the fire with cups of coffee. "A proposition?" Lillian raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "Not at all." Vincent set down his cup. "It's about the store." "What about it?" "I've been thinking you work too hard trying to manage it alone. The hours are long, the work is constant, and you barely have time for yourself." Lillian frowned. "It's not that bad. And I manage." "You do more than manage. You've made it thrive." Vincent leaned forward. "But what if you had help? A partner." "A partner?" Lillian's frown deepened. "Are you suggesting I sell half my business?" "No. I'm suggesting you marry me and let me help you run it." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lillian stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You want to marry me? To help with the store?" Vincent ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of frustration or nervousness. "No, that came out all wrong. I want to marry you because I love you, Lillian. The store is secondary. I'd marry you if you sold it tomorrow. You love me." Lillian's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes." Vincent moved from his chair to kneel beside hers. "I think I've loved you since I saw you hiding in the shadows at that barn dance. Certainly since I got to know you, your strength, your intelligence, your quiet dignity in the face of loss." He took her hand. "I know it hasn't been that long, and I know there will be talk. But I don't care about any of that. I care about you." Lillian's heart pounded so hard she was sure he must hear it. "Vincent, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now." He squeezed her hand. "Think about it. Take all the time you need." But Lillian didn't need time. The answer was clear in her heart, had been clear for weeks if she was honest with herself. She had been afraid to acknowledge it, afraid to trust happiness again after it had been so cruelly snatched away once before. "Yes," she said simply. Vincent blinked. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." Lillian smiled through sudden tears. "Not for the store, but because I love you too." The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He gathered her into his arms and kissed her, their first kiss, sweet and tender and full of promise. They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in the small church in Redemption Creek. The town turned out in force, any gossip silenced by the obvious devotion between bride and groom. Lillian wore blue instead of white, a nod to tradition for a widow, but also a deliberate step away from the black she had worn for so long. After the ceremony, there was a reception at the hotel, with music and dancing and more food than the town had seen since its founding celebration. When the fiddle player struck up a waltz, Vincent led Lillian onto the floor. "You're not hiding in shadows anymore," he murmured as they moved together. "No," Lillian agreed, thinking of how far she had come from that night at the barn dance. "I'm dancing in the light." 5 years later, the general store had expanded to twice its original size, with a thriving mail-order business that served ranches and homesteads throughout the county. Vincent split his time between the Silver Spur and the store, having hired a capable foreman who handled the day-to-day ranch operations. Their home behind the store had been enlarged as well, with a nursery added for their son Thomas Vincent, born in the summer of 1878, and their daughter Sarah Elizabeth, who arrived in the autumn of 1880. On the 5th anniversary of their meeting, Vincent surprised Lillian by organizing a barn dance at the Silver Spur. The entire town was invited, and as Lillian watched her husband swing their laughing daughter in his arms while their son attempted to mimic the steps of the older ranch hands, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Grief had transformed her, as Vincent had once said, but so had love his love, the love of their children, and the love she had learned to give freely again. When the music slowed and Vincent came to claim her for a dance, his eyes still held the same warmth they had when he'd found her hiding in the shadows all those years ago. "You'll dance with me?" he asked, extending his hand with a formal bow that made her laugh. "Always," Lillian answered, stepping into his embrace. "Always,"